I'm Kim Bobo, and I'm the founder of Interfaith Worker Justice, and I've been asked to talk a little bit about the history. So let me talk a little bit about my history first, as it relates to the founding. So I worked for 10 years for Bread for the World, which is a church-based lobby group on hunger issues. I then moved to Chicago to work for the Midwest Academy, which is a training center for community organizers. And the Academy had really strong ties with the labor movement, and so we ended up doing lots of work and training with labor groups. And I was always the person trying to get them to partner with the religious community. And often they would go like, work with the religious community? Really? Why would they want to work with us? I mean, it was just like, and then in 1989, I heard Mr. Trumka talk about the Pittston coal miners' strike, which was just a very righteous strike. These miners had gone out on strike around health care for pensioners, so not even for themselves, but for other people. And I was so impressed with that that I went up to one of the organizers, a great guy named Ken Zen, and said, so what's the religious community doing to support this strike? And he said, well, they're doing a little bit of work in Southwest Virginia, but really nothing besides that. And I said, well, how about if I put together a support committee for the strike of religious leaders around the country? And he was like, sure, lady, just, go ahead, right? And so I thought that all the denominations would have labor staff people, because they all had hunger staff people. And, most of them had housing, homelessness staff people. So I got on the phone, I called the denominations, and I said, hi, I'd like to talk to your labor staff person. And they were like, huh? Who? What? And really, not one single denomination or faith tradition had anybody assigned to either labor or work or workers, the economy, or anything in that kind of structural setting. They had hunger and maybe homelessness, but nothing much besides that. And I was like, whoa, that's interesting. So I did all this work with the Pittston coal miners' strike. We got religious folks all involved all over the country. It was really great fun, and we had sign-ons and meetings to various banks and board members and, normal kind of stuff. And at the end of it, I was struck by, one, how there was no structure within the religious community to do this work. And labor was so blown away by what I did, right? They flew me to D.C. to make a presentation about what I'd done, and it was like, well, I just like asked people to do things that made sense, right? But again, it was clear that they really did not understand the potential in the religious community. So at that point, I was just like, well, I can't do very much. I live in Chicago. Let me put together a religious group of labor folks here in Chicago who could work on labor issues, or religious folks in Chicago who work on labor issues. So, I got together about 25 or so friends in the religious community, Christian Jews, not Muslims at that point, although we added Muslims in the future. And, put together kind of here's a plan, here's what we're going to do. And in 1981 started the Chicago Interfaith Committee on Worker Issues, which is the predecessor to what's now Arise Chicago in Chicago. And we just started getting involved with union campaigns. And every campaign we got involved in, it made a difference in the campaign, right? It made a difference to workers, it made a difference to the employers, and it made a difference in terms of the public perception on that campaign. And we were just having great fun. And I had this amazing mentor, Don Turner, who was, at first, he was the assistant to the president of the Chicago Federation of Labor, and he kind of got assigned to work with us. And I think, honestly, he was kind of suspicious, because all the first meetings, he was kind of like, but, over time, he was like, whoa, these religious folks are really great, and they really care, and they're really sane, and, and so he became our biggest advocate, and then he became the Secretary-Treasurer of the Fed, and then he became the President of the Chicago Federation of Labor. And so I feel like part of the ability of IWJ to do well in the early years was that I had been mentored and groomed and grew up with Don Turner here in Chicago in a way that was so helpful to me. So anyway, we're working away. Monsignor Jack Egan and Rabbi Marks and Bishop Justin Witt, and I mean there was a whole slew of just incredible characters. We started the Labor in the Pulpits program here in Chicago. We started working with seminary students. We got involved in all these campaigns. We just did lots of creative actions. And again, I'm just doing this on the side. Like, you know, I'm working full-time for the Academy. I'm doing this kind of as a volunteer, although the Academy gave me complete flexibility to do this. They were so great. And then I would raise enough money to hire like a Lutheran volunteer or somebody who would do a lot of the sort of hands-on work. But it was so much fun, and I was learning stuff, and we'd start getting these calls. We got a call from Detroit, we got a call from Milwaukee, how do we get one of those groups in our town? And so we would take a little delegation out to meet with those folks and see if they could get a religious group in their town. And the work was great, and it just seemed like it was the right thing to be doing. So by 95, I actually was like ready to do something else and maybe run an organization, and so I applied for this one job here in Chicago with the Chicago Rehab Network, and got offered this job, and I was like, is that what I really want to do for the next 10 years of my life, right? Because I had worked in 10-year stints. Now I've overstayed my 10 years here at IWJ, but I've done things in 10-year stints, so it's like, was that what I wanted to do for 10 years? And I was just like, boy, I sure wish I could do something in this religion labor field, because it just felt like the timing was right. Mr. Sweeney had just been elected president of the AFL-CIO. He came in on a platform of building new partnerships with people. The religious community was sick of doing soup kitchens and shelters, and people were ready for something more. It felt like the timing was right. But I didn't feel like I was the right person, right? For a lot of reasons. One, I'd never really raised money. Two, I'd certainly never run an organization, although I was willing to do it. I wanted to do it at the Rehab Network. And three, I also had 16-month-old twins. It's like not the dream time for starting an organization, especially a national organization where you're going to have to travel a lot, right? But my husband, who was just a wonderful human being, Stephen Coates, he said, well, honey, we could get by on half your salary. So why don't you see if you could work out something with the Academy and see if you could do something. And when I talked to Jackie Kendall, the director of the Academy, about my struggle about whether to do this Rehab Network job, which was like a steady job, or to do this thing that was just an idea, her response to me was, "You call yourself an organizer, right?" It's like, well, yeah. Anyway, so she was completely encouraging, worked out an arrangement where I could work half-time for the Academy so that really I could spend the other half-time seeing if I could start IWJ. And there were lots of reasons why I wasn't the best person to do it, right? There were people who knew a lot more about labor history than I did, people who worked at the national level, people who run organizations, people who raise money. But the truth was, I couldn't think of anybody else who was really going to devote themselves to it and really dig in. And I've always believed hard work was really one of the most important things to succeeding. So I could certainly give it the hard work. So I literally spent the Christmas holiday between 95 and 96 writing a 10-page vision paper for what I thought the organization could and should do. And the 1st of January, I got on the phone and started calling people, asking them if they would be willing to be on a national board. And could I send you my vision paper of what I'm thinking we would do? And I called all these people. I tried to think about in each denomination who were the best people on labor issues, who had either had a history or a track record on those issues, or who had the position in the denomination that was closest to working on these issues. And then I just tried to recruit them all to the board. And so I recruited 45 religious leaders from across Protestant, Jewish, Catholic, to be on the board. And with everybody, I said, look, I don't have any money, and this is a completely new idea, and this is not just a name board. I need people who will really work. But will you pay your own way and come to board meetings and work hard and see if we can make this a go? And 45 people said yes, right? So, the second thing I started doing was trying to see if we could raise a little bit of money. I submitted the bylaw, or I submitted the incorporation papers in February. We had our first board meeting in March. I filed the 501c3 papers in April. So I know you can sit down and do them, right? Because I did. We actually got approved in May. Like 4 weeks we got approved, which is just a miracle. And then it took me 2 years to get our state sales tax exemption, so who could tell? We did our first delegation to a poultry plant in May. We did a national press conference in Atlanta in September. We issued our first newsletter in September. And it was clear by the summer of the first year that we were going to make it, right? And literally, I didn't know, right? And so I actually wasn't the first person on salary. Regina Botterill wasn't the first person on salary because I put her on salary before me. And then by midsummer, I quit my job with the academy and went on salary and started building the work around the country. So really, the first 5 years, the first sort of set period of the organization, was really focused on one, getting the religious community to understand that if you cared about poor people, if you cared about hunger and homelessness, then you had to care about wages and work questions. And if you're serious about those issues, you also have to support unions. I cannot tell you how many times I would say, well, I think unions are corrupt and blah, blah, blah. And I would say, look, unions are like the religious community. They are not perfect institutions, but they are instrumental if we're serious about raising wages and benefits for workers in this country, right? And they are invaluable in moving this forward. And so, again, I just did this huge message in the religious community, tons of speaking in the religious community, and tons of speaking in the labor community about if you want to build partnerships, the religious community needs to be one of your main partners. And again, a huge question was, they would say, well, why would they want to work with us? And I'd say, well, because they care about workers, they care about poor people, they care about the economy, but they just honestly didn't believe, and then they had no idea how to start building those relationships. So we did a huge amount of work the first 5 years in talking to the religious community, talking to the labor community, and then oftentimes organizing a meeting to get them in the same room. We would have religious leaders. I can remember doing a meeting in Wichita, Kansas, where the religious leadership and the labor leadership of the city had never met one another, right? And so we'd get them all in the room and talk about the shared values between the two. And we really built a lot of the interfaith committees in that period, right? Organizing groups to work on labor issues. And the main things that we did really in those first few years were we worked on local living wage campaigns, which were kind of all the sort of rage at that time, and we worked on these union campaigns. Now at the national level, we kind of had 3 priorities. One was building the structure around the country. The second was a really focus on poultry workers. And people at this point saying, what, poultry workers? Well, the reason was when I went to the AFL-CIO in the first few months and said, what are going to be your priorities? They said, we're going to do a multi-year, multi-union campaign focusing on poultry workers. And I'm like, works for me. We can get involved in poultry workers, right? Bad conditions, everybody gets it. Lots of religious folks already interested in poultry workers. So we started a whole project on poultry workers that was really aimed at sort of partnering with labor. Now what happened was the unions that were working on the campaign didn't get along with one another. A few years in, they disbanded the program, and we're kind of out there supporting poultry workers. And so the worker centers in Northwest Arkansas and Western North Carolina grow directly out of that early work with poultry workers. In fact, we had several other centers as well. But So poultry was one of our priorities. We also had a priority around religious employers, because the first, first few months talking to labor folks, everybody would start screaming at me about how religious hospitals were busting unions, or how when people built their churches, they built them all non-union. And anyway, so people were so upset about this. Well, I thought, particularly on the religious hospital side, that the women religious, the Catholic women's orders who ran those hospitals, just really didn't understand how detrimental their anti-union stuff was, and that if we just explained it to them, then things would get a lot better. And really, it's not just the Catholics, it's all about the religious hospitals. They're all awful on labor stuff. So we spent several years trying to explain it to them, and those were some of the most horrible conversations in my life because, my sense is they understood very well, and that there really is a dynamism that happens within our religious institutions where we think when we're in leadership that we have a special ordination from God, and thus if you in any way challenge what we think and believe, like a union might, that you're challenging our core integrity. And so, in fact, these institutions become just terribly difficult to deal with when workers trying to organize. And, as somebody who had to negotiate a contract, I can understand those feelings, right? But anyway, so we did a lot of work on that, and that was, again, it was a project we did for several years, and then we kind of just let that one fade away. So, that kind of takes us up through, into the early 2000s. By 2001, 2002, we're starting to get lots of calls at the interfaith groups from workers who, generally speaking, haven't gotten paid. That's what happened here in Chicago, at our Chicago interfaith group. We'd get all these calls from workers or from pastors who referred their workers to us. And so we started doing this worker rights kind of work. And that the same was happening with a lot of the other interfaith groups as well. They were doing worker rights kind of stuff, or trying to do a worker rights manual, or, And what happened is that really that kind of evolved into these worker centers. And so we began building a worker center here, in several of the other cities. And then as we started to have a handful of worker centers, then more worker centers affiliated with us. And so I feel like sort of the second phase for us was really moving into all this worker center stuff. There were also several other things that I think were important in that sort of middle period. We did a huge amount of work with seminary students, seminary and rabbinical students. We had a very large seminary summer program that was funded by the AFL-CIO, where we had anywhere from 25 to 30 seminary students. And on top of that, one year we had an extra 35 undergrad students. So again, we were running intern programs with 65 and 70 students over the summer, which just dramatically expanded our base, both with the interfaith groups, but also with young people in campuses. We had a number of seminary chapters. We did a project called Religious Perspectives on Work, where we worked with faculty on creating classes on work issues within the seminaries. So again, I feel like the second period was really one of deepening our work with seminaries and rabbinic schools, of which, again, we continue to benefit from that. And if you look around the country, there's lots of people in leadership who came from some of our seminary programs. So now the funding for that ran when the AFL-CIO and Change to Win split. That completely messed up all the funding for the seminary summer stuff. And then as the resources in labor have diminished, we've never been able to recover that. And so it's really been very difficult to run that program since then. Second thing that was really important in this period, third thing I guess, is really deepening the work with unions, right? Trying to be much more creative, much more intentional, and expanding the number of unions that we work with. Because while in phase one, we were just convincing unions of the value of working with the religious community, by the second phase, a number of unions are saying, okay, what would it look like for us to have some religious partners on this campaign? So again, really began deepening a bunch of those partnerships. We also began our work with the Department of Labor and we got them to do bulletin inserts on workers' rights in 9 different languages. We created resources for poultry workers. We, at one point, we sued the Department of Labor they had all these workers who were owed back wages, but no way for workers to find out that they were owed back wages, and so we sued for all those names, and anyway, that got us into a lot of conversations in the Department of Labor. In fact, they still remember when we sued them. But again, we developed a lot of partnerships with staff people at the Department of Labor that, again, have stayed with us since then. So again, I think that the second phase was really that. It was beginning sort of that work with those worker centers. It was the seminary work. It was deepening the ties with the unions. And then it was all the DOL partnership stuff and the worker rights piece. I kind of start the third phase really in 2008, which started out horrible. On the one hand, 2008 was when my first wage theft book came out. So on the one hand, it should have been just the most exciting time. And it was, right? The book came out, I did over that year and the next, I did 100 radio interviews, I did lots of TV, I did a speaking tour, all this kind of stuff. But the economy crashed. And we, in 1 year, lost half the reserve that I had built up throughout the first however many years. And honestly, I just wasn't sure we were going to survive. It was so awful. It was the first time in my history where if somebody had promised us money, I could go to the bank with it, right? They always delivered, right? Whether it was a foundation or a union, or if people promised me money, it came in, and I could count on it. And that didn't happen, right? People had promised me money, and it didn't come in, and they called and said, I'm so sorry, we can't send it. But by that point, I couldn't cut fast enough, right? So it was just, it was a horrible time for me personally. Anyway, I don't know that everybody else realized. I mean, at one point, I was trying to share some of my angst about all this, and staff people said, we'd rather you didn't share all that. But anyway, I just felt like, and honestly, around that point, I was thinking, well, maybe, maybe it's about time I should start thinking about leaving, whatever. Well, you couldn't, right? Who would want an organization when it's falling apart financially? So really, I feel like all we did in the end of 2008 and 2009 and even into 2010 was just survive, right? Trying to figure out how you scale back and get enough money to kind of keep things going. And then by 2010, things started feeling like, okay, all right, we can kind of start reinvesting. And I think by that point, it was also where there were all these attacks on unions going on, and just a right-wing sort of expansion around the country. And what you saw was unions being in this very defensive kind of mode. And frankly, organizing, there not being all that much new organizing of workers. And so what became for us important was, one, always continuing to stand with unions, right? Because again, we need them. But also, the work that we had begun with worker centers became, I think, even more central to the organization in this period. And so we started, investing more resources in supporting them and reaching out to them and doing training and bringing folks together. And then the more we did, the more worker centers that weren't affiliated with us wanted to affiliate with us. So in fact, a lot of the growth over the last few years, I think, has really come from the worker centers. And I think we've, tried, maybe not always successfully, but really tried to figure out how do we integrate that religious work with the worker center stuff and have the stuff, even though they're kind of separate networks, have some stuff kind of moving together. If we're going to do public policy, we really need to invest in having staff in DC. So we hired staff in DC, we've gone through several configurations on staff in DC, but really made a commitment that we're going to have a presence in DC. And I think that was important not only for public policy reasons, but to have somebody very visible in DC among all of our partners. In the early years, I thought it was important that we weren't in DC and that we didn't get kind of tied up in all the DC gobbledygook, and that we focused on building a base around the country. But I actually believe in the last few years it has hurt us to not have more of a presence in DC where really all of our partners are. So again, I think we've got to continue to make sure that we're very present so we recognize us and remember us and all that sort of stuff. We also, I think in this third period, invested a lot in the social media work and the internet work, and you have to realize when I started IWJ, right, there wasn't even email, right? All the proposals were done on typewriters and computers, but half the proposals you still had to pull the typewriter out to do stuff. Everything was mailed, nothing was emailed. Fax machine was, if you wanted to send out anything, you faxed it out. That's how I faxed out the vision papers to people. I faxed it, right, because you didn't email. So again, the growth of the internet and the social media has really been in this third period in a way that, again, I think we've done great work, and there's great work still to do in that area for us, because increasingly it is a way to move this forward. And then I think what has also been sort of the third area in this third period has been the focus on wage theft. It's so weird because, I wrote the book on wage theft, right? I wrote it in 2008 and then I redid it in 2011. But I think when I wrote it, certainly when I wrote it the first time, I thought once I wrote the book, I would just be done. And then I was like, oh no, you need to do a book tour. Oh, okay, I'll do a book tour. And then you do a book tour, and then people start wanting to do things around wage theft. Anyway, so it really helped. It helped sort of push forward this whole movement around ordinance bills, around wage theft, around studies, around. It alone didn't do it, right? There was already a movement on this, but it sort of played a role. And for IWJ, it became a really defining issue for us, and one that unified the whole base. Workers cared about it, and the worker centers cared about it. The religious community thought it was awful, right, and really could get behind it. So again, it became just a really important unifying issue for the organization, and one we became, again, a little to my surprise, we kind of became known for that work. I just want to talk a little bit about the future, right? And what I think the future holds for IWJ. So clearly, I think these worker centers are a key part of our future, right? How do we support them? A lot of them are kind of hanging on by their fingernails, so how do we get them to the next level? How do we get them working together? How do we use that collective power to sort of move the power in the country? Anyway, I think the worker centers, and the more we can invest in worker centers is really significant for us. I, of course, don't ever want to lose the faith work, right? But I actually think the faith work, we got to figure out how do we position ourselves, or how do we embed ourselves more in congregations. If you look at what's happened over the last 20 years, the denominational structures are just dwindling. There's virtually no staff there, there's very little money there, there's very little power there, and the real influence for most people of faith is really at the congregational level. So how do we do a better job connecting? We've tried with some congregational programs that haven't quite worked. So again, it feels like if we could figure that piece out, it would allow us to really expand and grow our faith work. Third, I do think the public policy stuff continues to make sense for us. For us to be the place that can both connect workers through the worker centers and a faith lens on these core worker standard issues, that completely makes sense. And building the structures that can organize around those public policy pieces makes sense to me. As people know, I've kind of toyed a little bit in the last couple of years around what can we do with ethical employers. Because even though I've spent much of my life beating up on the bad guys, and I think IWJ we do a good job on that, I do believe that we've got to be affirming the good guys as well as beating up on the bad guys. And that makes sense. It makes sense in the religious community. And that there are stuff we can do here, whether it's the living wage certification program or just helping identify more ethical businesses through congregations and getting them to speak out on our issues. Again, I think there's a variety of ways, but I think there's a space of work that, at the point when we can get the resources and figure out how to do some of that, I think that's very interesting. I also am excited about the potential of doing some civic engagement work. Again, it feels like it's another tool in the toolbox that we haven't fully taken advantage of. And now we did do a number of years ago, we did do one voter registration project. And we registered 36,000 voters. And honestly, it was very difficult, right? And after one experience, I was like, okay, I'm done now. But again, I think if we don't only focus on voter reg, which is actually it's tough to build the organization with voter reg, but if we can do other parts of the civic engagement work, really the getting people to the polls, getting people to understand the issues, the stuff that really relates to the issues that we care about, I think there's a lot of potential. So I don't know, that's my short history on the organization. I just continue to think that Interfaith Worker Justice is one of the most important organizations around, and I look forward to doing my part to support the organization wherever I am, and know that the work will be changed and carried on by some wonderful people. God bless.